to medical school. We do 2 years of basic sciences, and then we do 2 years of clinicals. We see patients, and we help them using the most least interventions possible as our primary weapon for taking care of them and helping with disease. Now, I know a lot of you have probably heard about getting a disease treated, right? Having hypertension and getting a hypertensive medication. Well, today, because my focus in my field is to actually help the patient, not with treatment, but with reestablishing the basis for their health to allow their body to naturally heal itself to not need an antihypertensive medication. So, today's topic is deadly assault. And I'm going to be talking about the issue of salt today. A lot of people that we know, or I know, has hypertension. And this is a big problem in our country today. It's one of the leading diseases. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't know how to manage their blood pressure. So, I'm going to be talking a little bit about that. Any questions so far? Did I make it clear in what I... So here's some statistics. The average sodium intake for Americans, whether they're 2 years or above, are around 3,400 milligrams per day of sodium. Does anyone know the average amount of sodium we should consume? Well, hang on to that question, because we'll get there. But between 1999 and 2008, blood pressure for ages 8 to 17 has increased. For boys, it's currently 20% of our young boys and 12.6% of our girls. This is a problem because if blood pressure is not managed early at an early age, this can lead to bigger problems when you're getting older and you don't have a way of managing it. Taste preferences for salty foods are unfortunately established early in life, and this is where we have to be careful with our kids, giving them foods that are not high in salt, because they're going to have a natural tendency to want to eat salty foods. So no chips. Here's the statistics of the mean daily intake of sodium for our population, whether male or female. The dark green are our males, and this goes from ages 2 all the way to 70 and above at the right. Now, as you can see, our males consume a lot more sodium in their intake, especially the peak between ages 30 and 39 years old. Now, you see that dark line that goes horizontal? That is where our maximum intake of sodium is supposed to be. And unfortunately, even from 2 years being a boy, right here, they're already at the maximum. Now this is a problem, right? Let's talk about our kids. 80% almost of children 1 to 3 years have hypertension. Actually, that's not right, sorry. I was planning to use my slides today. Sorry, consume too much sodium. Not hypertension, that's not correct. Almost 90%, ages 4 to 5 years, also consume too much sodium. Among them, unfortunately, are mostly our African American children, our boys and our girls. Now, 1 to 5 years old, less than 10% of these kids eat enough potassium per day. So I'm going to be talking about a balance, because you want to have more potassium in your diet than you do sodium. And this is where we can help actually control sodium levels in the blood. Having a higher amount of potassium in your daily intake will help with regulating potassium, regulate your sodium. A good thing is breastfed infants do not have as high amount of potassium or sodium. So we want to consider recommending people to do that, have breastfeeding until 12 months and introduce them to more potassium-rich foods so that they have a taste for less salty foods growing up even into 1 year. So here's some statistics on our kids. As you can see, it's separated by race. Black is the blue, the dark blue. White is the middle, kind of darker blue, lighter blue. And Mexican American is the white. And then the upper intake level is the green. Now, you see for infants that black infants are actually consuming the highest amount in all 3 groups. So this is a big thing. This is a real consideration because, unfortunately, I think we all know in our country that the black population is always targeted when it comes to hypertension, right? Does anyone know that? Have you seen it on television and stuff like that? So just take that in mind. It does have to do with our daily sodium intake. So what's the difference between sodium and salt? Now, salt and sodium are not the same thing. We know that sodium is a mineral that naturally occurs in our foods, right? But table salt is a combination of sodium and fluoride. Normally, table salt is about 40% sodium and 60% fluoride. And that's mostly what's in our table salt. I'll talk about the other salts, like sea salt, and the differences between those and table salt. So, sodium is primarily consumed as salt. That means the most sodium that we get is from the salt that we eat. Not from the foods that we just eat. It's from the salt. Salt added at the table and in cooking provides a small proportion of that total sodium that we consume. So what am I saying here? That most of the salt that we consume and sodium we consume is from processing of foods. Whether you're buying a packaged frozen meal or you're going to a restaurant and they've already had that pre-made and processed for you, whether you're getting a canned product, they're all processed. And this is where a lot of the salt is added in our diets. Oh, I forgot to mention. So if anyone has any questions, please feel free to ask while I present. I don't want to feel like I'm just up here talking. But yeah, please, if you have a question, just raise your hand or comment that really has some correction or even support. I don't mind at all. I want to feel like I'm in my family.
I could ask you one question.
Yes.
You know, when you buy like canned beans,
Yes.
and it shows the sodium in there, is that in the liquid? I'm saying, if you pour off the liquid and wash beans, would you be okay? Is that sodium in the liquid or what?
That's a good question. So what do you think? It's inside the beans? Anybody else?
It's in the liquid.
It's in the liquid? Anybody else? It's in both. Yes. It most likely is in both, because whenever you preserve a food in a liquid, there's going to be some diffusion of ions between the food and the liquid, right? And particles, minerals. So the salt that's in the water is going to get in the beans and vice versa. Water always follows salt. So I don't know if you guys remember a little bit of osmosis, yes. But water always follows the salt. So there's always going to be an interchanging going on. So they might say, oh, you know, you can rinse off the beans with natural water and use them, but the beans are still going to have salt. That's a good question. Thank you.
What about with that where it says low sodium? What is that?
Low sodium. That is a good question. So I'm going to bring up what that means in a couple. If I don't answer it, bring that back to me. Salt is important for our bodies, right? We need it. Without sodium, our cells cannot allow certain molecules into the cell to do the job, and vice versa. Our gut actually uses uses sodium in order to absorb proteins. That is a very important part of our digestion. We don't absorb proteins, we can't make new proteins, we can't make new cells. So we need sodium in a certain amount. So don't say, oh, I don't need to do any sodium salt in my diet at all. What I'm saying is, it's important for us to have some sodium, but we have to be careful how much. So most salt is harvested from salt mines, evaporating seawater, or other mineral-rich waters. That's where we get our salt from. The first salt I'm going to talk about is table salt. How many use table salt? Okay. So table salt is one of the most commonly used salts, right? It's usually highly refined, unfortunately. That means there's processing involved in order to extract and put the right combination to make table salt. The problem with table salts is the anti-caking agents that are put in there. Now, they use anti-caking agents because if they did not, the salt would just clump up and be hard for you to season it on your food. So the reason that they use it is to help it to be movable and able to spread it on your food. Now, food-grade table salt is almost pure sodium chloride. I want you to remember this. So table salt is mostly sodium and chloride. All right? Now, this has to do with also the issue of iodine. Now, a lot of people have cravings for salt. Why do you think that is? Anybody? We can be addicted to it. Yeah, that's a good one. Now, a lot of times your body's trying to tell you something. Sometimes your body needs the sodium to do processes, right? And sometimes your body's actually telling you might need some iodine. It's hard to get iodine in our diets today. So what they did was they added iodine to the table salt for people to not have issues of hypothyroidism, having goiters, and conditions like that. Does anyone know anyone with a goiter or hypothyroid? It's a big issue today. If people don't know, they still added the iodine in the salt, but hypothyroidism is still a big problem today. And I'm going to be talking a little bit about those determinants of health that could be a reason why. So it's good that they added the iodine, but they added it in the processed salt, which is not the best thing. You don't ever want to single out a nutrient and start taking it regularly because you may overexcite your glands. You may actually cause problems that way. Now, the maximum of iodine in consumption for kids is about 100 micrograms per day. I'm not going to read everything on here. You can see it, right? For adults, you see that for pregnant women and for breastfeeding women. But there's an importance for iodine. We need it in our bodies in order for our thyroids to make thyroid hormone. Our thyroids are right here. They make this thyroid hormone to do many functions in our body. And it's really important for us to have iodine. Now, I'm going to talk about the amounts of sodium in table salt. In case people didn't know, 1/4 a teaspoon. Do you know what 1/4 a teaspoon is? It's really tiny. It's about 575 milligrams. Now, just remember that. 1/2 teaspoon, 1150 milligrams. Now try just 1 teaspoon altogether. That is your maximum daily amount right there. 2,300 milligrams of sodium in 1 teaspoon of salt. So just keep that in mind on how little we need, really, in our diets. So what if you don't want to add salt or don't add salt to your diet? You can also try other alternatives. There are sea vegetables. Has anyone ever heard of kelp, kambu, wakame? Those vegetables actually have a good amount of iodine and salt in them to help supply your nutritional intake of iodine. So, you just want to be careful that you're not consuming too much of it, because the maximum amount for adults is about 1,100 milligrams total per day.
So don't exceed that for these types of sea vegetables?
Yes. Okay, so I'm going to talk about sea salt. Does anyone use sea salt? Any particular brand of sea salt? Or type of sea salt? They have different brands out there. They have like Morton's brand.